It is Ian Ryan with your pre-match warm-up as we start to look ahead to Wolverhampton Wanderers at Molyneux on Tuesday night. I've got Neil Atkinson, Ian Salmon and Craig Hannan with me for this one. But we are sponsored by Order Frames. Neil, you've got it in front of you there.
Here we are, just sitting here for a second or two at the start of the show. I hope you can see that. Listen, Order Frames have been brilliant with the Anfield Wrap. We've enjoyed partnering with them for an extended period of time and they're giving it a big push with us right now. Why? You might ask yourself. Because of Mother's Day. That's the main reason why they're aware of the fact that they're a really good gift. So if you go to orderframes.co.uk and use the promo code TAW, you can get some money off at this point. You can upload an unlimited number of photos to this and it can sit there. So Order Frames know the market. Their market is the sort of feckless son who can't decide what to get his mother and knows that at no notice he can enjoy this sort of benefit and this sort of offer. Craig Hannan, do you know such a man?
Feckless son, you say?
I don't know. Does anyone? Although I have bought them. Yeah, no, I actually. I think I bought 2 people them, and then at Christmas was telling the entire audience, the entire office to buy them, and I believe another 2 bought. So perfect, absolutely perfect.
There you go. So if you just go to orderframes.co.uk and use the code TAW, you'll be able to take the benefits as well, and just get someone else to do your thinking for you. If in this instance it's me and Craig Hannan. Go on, Ian. What are you doing?
Craig. The manager's on a press conference. I want to get to that and Wolves shortly. But first of all, just some reflection on the weekend's events, really. I think broadly speaking, the results go as many probably would have expected. Maybe you could have a chat about Villa versus Wolves, but given where Villa are at the minute, I thought Wolves would probably get something at Molyneux and it plays out that way. But you'd have to say, all in, it's a really good weekend for Liverpool.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, they find themselves in a decent position. They're scoring goals in the early part of a game. They're scoring more and more set pieces and becoming the best at it, which is quite the turnaround.
It is.
Quite the comeback. And all in all, I think we can look at that game as one that we've enjoyed. I know that they'll have been, and I've been away for the weekend. I haven't looked at anything online or seen anything or heard anything on shows. I'm sure people will have looked at times where Liverpool were open or times when Villa had chances, and I think the difference at the weekend you see is that Liverpool are scoring from set pieces. They're able to get one early, they're able to get goals in the bank so that whenever the West Ham goal goes in, then Liverpool are ahead enough and have enough sort of leeway and room to breathe. And Liverpool took their chances at different times when they had maybe things that you could call half chances. But I think it's a real sort of positive weekend. I know the results go the way in which they do elsewhere, but Liverpool should also be looking at what's happening in Villa and saying, well, we're not in just we're not competing for 4th and 5th here. We're competing for 3rd. We want to be as high in the table as we possibly can. And given how Villa have performed recently, given the games that Villa have coming up, I know they play both Chelsea and United, which again gives us an opportunity to move higher. So that's how we should be looking. But in terms of continued momentum, in terms of adding bit by bit a little bit of feel good around, this season, but particularly as we come into the business end where there only are 10 Premier League games. There's obviously some big cup games coming up. Liverpool need to have that momentum, and they have a bit of it at the moment.
Only 10 to go, so the running kind of starts now. It was a really, really positive weekend, though, in the main, because, as Craig says, Villa now feel very catchable. I think even before the weekend, you could look at them and go, they're in a bit of free fall here, missing a lot of players. The centre of the pitch is a problem for them at the minute. They get their defeat on Friday. It could have been an even better weekend, but for some interesting refereeing at Old Trafford as well, you'd have to say.
Yeah, I've only seen the goals from the Old Trafford game, so I know the penalty has been discussed widely, but I've not actually seen it played back yet. So I know Arne spoke about it. Yeah, it's basically the same as Mo's, isn't it? The one that Mo.
Yeah, there's similarities. The manager's done his press conference and he talks a little bit about that today.
Well, it's the first question asked to him, isn't it?
Yeah, and he says basically, if kind of right decisions have been made, then Liverpool are a little bit closer to kind of some of their rivals, and that's absolutely right.
It's true, and there's been instances of that all through the season, but it's also the weirdness about us at the weekend was it was a game for us that showed every version of ourselves within the same 90 minutes. All the good stuff and all the really bad stuff at the same time. And we scored 5, could have scored 7 quite easily. 7 would not have flattered us, but we weren't very good. And I don't know if West Ham were actually quite good and far better than I expected them to be, or if we made them look better than I expected them to be because they had chances. We still look too open. we don't look accomplished yet. We don't look dominant yet. But we won 5-2, so it came out buzzing. It's a really, really odd situation to be in, but it sets us up perfectly for going forward. And suddenly scoring. I don't like depending on set pieces because we're not creating a great deal. I mean, you could argue that Frimpong creates a goal, Cody creates a goal, but both of them are deflections. But we're not actually creating goals at the moment. We're scoring from set pieces. It's a weird turnaround. I'll take it. I really will take it because if that gets us to the end of the season, as you said, this is the run-in now. So, and we are aiming for third.
I think there's dependent on set pieces, and then there's having it as part of your armoury. There's a difference here, isn't there? And like,
although the weekend was very much depending on set.
Of course,
I won't even accept. I don't accept Ekatike's goal as a set piece. Really, it's following on from a set piece, so it's not as bad as it looked.
No, it kind of leaves the box. So maybe
5-2 isn't as bad as it looks.
At least once, maybe twice before it eventually ends up at his feet. I think Neil made a good point about the Matip Divock Origi comparison as well, where he kind of just gets it laid off to him from Gravenberch before he slots. But Neil, set pieces have been, again, a massive kind of talking points across the weekend. Now, the manager's done his press conference, as we mentioned before. We'll actually hear from him shortly, but at the very end of his press conference, he gets drawn into a little bit of chat about style of play, where football's heading. I'm sure, like you caught the Chelsea-Arsenal game, which is just a bit of a fucking mess, to be honest. It's not pretty on the eye, it's not great. A lot of Arsenal's games have been like that, I think, this season. But across the league, a lot of football matches have been like that, where you're tuning in and you're not really drawn into the kind of silky football or the great kind of, quality on display. It is very much attritional. It is very much set pieces that are kind of getting teams over the line. What have you made of it, and what do you think of the spectacle right now we're watching?
I think there's a lot of bad games in terms of the spectacle, and I don't think it is. I think the manager himself ends up sort of saying, is it because obviously a lot of sides are better? I think it's more that sides have decided broadly this is their best way home. I think you can still have better quality and better players, but sides are trying to reduce the games to controllable moments, and I think that sort of suits the coaches. I think it's what the coaches want. I think coaches feeling as though if we coach to be remarkably solid and then get one from a set piece because we coach the set piece, then we've got more involvement, and I think that's sort of a logical thing that's come through there. I don't think it is necessarily solely down to sort of standard of players, meaning that there's more cancelling out. I think you then choose to approach games in a way that cancels out. I think in terms of the weekend, what's really interesting is, and a lot of Liverpool supporters globally won't like this, a lot of Liverpool supporters locally won't like this, but there's worse things that can happen across the next few weeks than Liverpool and Manchester United win all their games. United have got to play Villa coming up, and I think that it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if effectively in this weekend is another pathway towards it. There just ends up being a gap where Liverpool and United are challenging each other for who's going to come third, and then it's Villa and Chelsea are in a dogfight for who's going to come fifth. I think some clear blue water would be no bad thing. So in a couple of weeks, United have still got to play Chelsea, they've still got to play Villa, we've still got to play all three. Villa and Chelsea play each other on Wednesday night, and why this is big for us this week is if we win, we're then back level on points with Villa as United are. And I think if we can do that, the pressure's then on Villa before that Chelsea game. But the pressure's on them anyway. They need to get a result and they need to get the momentum back. But Villa aren't playing well. Villa have had a side that are capable of magical moments this season, but a lot of it's been Morgan Rogers firing it in from distance and opening games up for them, or Tielemans doing the same thing. The reason why Arsenal-Chelsea, I think, stuck in the craw a little bit was the extent to which it was first versus sixth. And Chelsea are a Champions League team. I mean, they're the world champions insofar as that matters. And you're just watching this dogfight really all the way through the game. There's very few moments of football that take your breath away, and there's good players on the pitch. There's a number of good players on the pitch. I'm not having for a second Declan Rice isn't great. He obviously is. But you're not sort of left going, what about that moment of magic from Saka? He does one brilliant thing late in the game where he surges into the box. To the point that I remember it, even though I was only sort of quite casually watching the game, because I'm like, oh, amazing. I'm glad someone's done something that grabs your attention in that sort of way. Palmer's getting on the ball, but he's not really hurting anyone in the early going, and then that gets on top of. These just only fine margins, let's be clear. Loads of football on the whole is a bit shit. We all love the game. £10 a month, by the way. We all love the game, and we're all bang into it. But there are extended periods of football matches and seasons where it is a bit rubbish. What there's just not been this year, I don't think, is that many great games or that many astonishing moments or brilliant halves that capture the spirit and you go, oh my God, this is absolutely brilliant. You've watched it become reduced, you've watched the time wasting, you've watched how long everyone is taking on set pieces. The ball in play is not actually that much lower, but that's because you're watching injury time boards go up even in pretty mundane halves with 7. And that's become normal. It's normal to waste more of your time as the punter because they're wasting more of your time in the matches, and then the referees are counterbalancing that by going 7 rather than going, lad, it shouldn't take this long to take a corner, yellow card. And all of that's just making everyone feel a bit oof. And then you get the video assistant refereeing in as well. The manager's dead interested on it. I'm pleased he spoke about it. Some people won't be because he can't do right for doing wrong. But I think it is less good. I think it is less good as a spectacle. And I think it is something that the Premier League should be worrying about because there's a reason why these teams have all this money. And the reason is because all around the world people pay money to screen these games. And it might well be that a few people stop watching because they're going, well, what's the point? It's just loads of big lads running into each other.
And that's the important bit whenever you say the Premier League, because you look elsewhere in football and it's not attritional, it's not as agricultural as what we've seen this season within England, particularly whenever you watch a round of games in the Champions League as an example, and then it's contrasting with them what you watch at the weekend. You see the Atlanta game, and you see all of this like football, but all of these comebacks and these moments and this like just dead exciting spectacle for the Champions League's brand. Well, if I'm Premier League, that would be the worry that I would have around this. And I think Arne Slot mentions it in his press conference as well. He says, I'm watching the Eredivisie and there's reasons why this is happening in England and it's not happening there, and it's the way the referees are reffing at corners as an example. So but yeah, it's just an interesting contrast whenever you've enjoyed the Wednesday night and then you've endured the weekend.
Well, yeah, here is the manager now on the spectacle and the current direction of travel.
Now, first of all, you have to accept. I think it's mainly here in the Premier League. If I watch other leagues, I don't think there's so much emphasis on set pieces. One of the reasons is, and that's sometimes funny for me to do, if I watch a Eredivisie game, which I still do, I see goals being disallowed or falls on goalkeepers being given. And I'm like, wow, that's a big difference. Here you can almost hit a goalkeeper in his face and the referee still says, just go on. Do I like it? My football heart doesn't like it. I already said once in this press conference, if you ask me, then thinking about football, I think about 10, 15 years ago about the Barcelona team. Every Sunday evening you were hoping that they would play. And now most of the games I see in the Premier League are not, for me, a joy to watch. But it's always interesting because it's so competitive. And that is what makes this league great, because there's so much competitiveness. Everyone can win from everyone. But just as someone who loves to watch football without being interested in who's winning or losing it, just to be enjoyed, I think there's a big difference now between 3 or 4 years ago in the Premier League. Not only because of the set pieces, also because teams have become so much stronger. So 3 or 4 years ago, when the top clubs faced the number 18, 17, 16, 15, could have been a 4 or 5 goals difference. And that's usually what you like. If there's so much difference between the teams, then one team is really good. But that's not the situation anymore. So it's not only about the set pieces. It's also because so many teams have become very strong. But we're not going to change it. So and maybe in 5 or 10 years' time, things will change again. But what I wouldn't be surprised of, if you go to an under-16 game somewhere, how do you call this, your Sunday league football? We call this amateur football in Holland. I wouldn't be surprised if you see teams completely being focused, 16-year-olds on set pieces. That's the new reality, and I have my opinion about it, but it doesn't change.
And Craig, one of the things the manager was asked about was the fitness of Florian Wirtz. I think most people, maybe him included as well, by the way, thought that he'd be featuring just after the Forest game. That's not the case. He says Tuesday's probably going to come a little bit too soon for him as well. Maybe even Friday. It could be early next week before we see Florian Wirtz, which is a bit of a blow.
It's a little bit of a worry, yeah, because at the beginning it was described as a precaution, I think, and look, we know from these that Arne Slot gives very, very little away in terms of the injuries and the specifics around them, and so that leaves us like discussing it and worrying and escalating what might be the issue. It would have been perfect to have him in these games, but I think most importantly for me anyway is from next week onwards, where you've got a massive Champions League game and you've got some big games on the horizon, particularly away games, because when you look at the fixtures that we've got for the rest of the season, our away games are as difficult as what you could have had them, other than City and Arsenal, but the teams around us. So having him would be massive. There's also the impact that it has whenever he comes back, and whether it takes him a little bit of time to get back into it. So you'd love nothing more than to have him as an option on Friday, at most off the bench.
Potentially that, but there's almost this thing in my head where if he's not going to play Tuesday, do they then just think, well, actually, do we risk him in an FA Cup game, or do we just maybe get him right for the Tuesday against Galatasaray? And if it's even touch and go, then you just go one step further and say, actually, let's just park over that. You know, it's a game where it will be, quite tough. It'll be on top. There'll be challenges coming in. It's a bit of a shame, but I think ultimately they'll just have to take care of the football, because he is absolutely key to what Liverpool want to achieve this season.
Completely. I think he's a wonderful footballer. I've been saying it since the first week. The way he moves, he reminds me of Kenny Dalglish. He's got that same shoulder drop as Beardsley. He's got all the invention that we need, and he makes things happen around him. So if he's not ready for Tuesday, don't worry about Friday. If he's not ready for Tuesday, if he's not ready for a league game, don't risk him in an FA Cup game. Hold on till Galatasaray, when he will be important. And if he's not ready, then don't try him there. Because when it comes to back injuries, I just start thinking Curtis Jones. Curtis Jones picked up back injuries and you didn't see him for 6 months. And that's the thing that concerns me, that once you come to a back injury, you've no idea why it is, because the soft tissue damage in the back, it does all kinds of weird things to your back, doesn't it? So he's too good a player to risk bringing back too early. I think part of our problem with Isak at the beginning of the season was we tried him too early, and then you put him out for 2 months, and it needs to be right. And the fact that we got through Saturday without him is good, because the first half against Forest without him was an absolute nightmare. So we can survive without him. We're not completely a one-man team yet, but preserve him for the run-in, because there could be far more important games than the FA Cup game. Much I won't win the FA Cup game.
That's the key thing for me, is that you look at what we want April and May to be. You want as many of the Liverpool players, and ultimately, and it's not hard this, by the way, without slaughtering Liverpool again, but it would be lovely to feel as though Liverpool played the best football of the season in April and May. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is because there's still everything to achieve in April and May. And the second reason, though, is that it sets up next season really positively. If we end this season, I tell you what, it wasn't great in parts, but we were flying there at the very end. We've seen that before. Seen that before in many a campaign, and how you build on that going into the season that follows. So I think it is important that they ensure they're doing the right thing around him, because I think, let's be clear, bottom of the league, as I say, I think they're better than that, and certainly better than the points haul that they've got, but bottom of the league twice back-to-back, one's a cup game, you shouldn't be desperate to have him. Even Galatasaray away, you shouldn't be desperate to have him. If that leg doesn't go as you hope, you've still got a home leg where hopefully he'll be available. But if it does go as you hope, you can make a bit of a case that there'd be worse things than he is getting because he's getting rest whilst this is going on. He's not just recuperating from injury. It's not like he doesn't also get some rest, because my God, the load on him's been enormous. So the idea that, if you said to me right now, we'll be absolutely fine, but you're not going to see him again until Brighton away, because he's then going to go off into Germany, so we're going to play him at Brighton away, I'll go, well, okay, if we're going to say we're going to do absolutely fine, because I can believe that we do absolutely fine in this run. When we're back, though, quarter-final of the FA Cup, hopefully quarter-final of the Champions League, Fulham need to get a result there. The biggest game of the season's looming on the horizon at the Hill Dickinson. Need them for that, need to get a result in that one. And all of this, and then hopefully, semi-finals. So I think it's about, there's worse things that can happen in a season than a player like Viet ends up getting a bit of time in March, as long as our lads keep doing the business on the pitch in the meantime.
I agree with everything said. I would say that we might be underselling the FA Cup, and I don't mean as a competition, but I mean as an opportunity, particularly for the manager as well, because, look, I believe Liverpool in any season can win the Champions League, but it's really fucking hard, and things go against you, and you're going to come up against some of these brilliant teams. And as a man who wants to go far in the FA Cup, I just think it might be an opportunity. If they look at it and they think, look, it's not going to be a risk, and think having him on the squad, I think that why that'll be important as well is because it can go to extra time, and we obviously aren't blessed with loads of options that we trust in a game where you need a winner or you need a moment of magic, particularly in a difficult place. And I know we've just talked about where they are and what, but it's still a difficult place to go to at Molyneux, and some sides have seen that recently. So I think if they don't see it as a risk and can have him for even 10-15 minutes at some stage in late in the game, then they might have him. But yeah, it'd be brilliant. It'd be the most important thing for me is getting him back for the Galatasaray game.
Yeah, they'll certainly want to kind of balance it, Craig. I think the other thing the manager was asked about in terms of fitness was Frimpong. We spoke a little bit about right back and some of the challenges this season of just being able to kind of deal with all of the issues around that position, and most of them are about injuries and players missing games and stuff. But Frimpong obviously plays a part at the weekend. I really like him. I've pretty much liked him from the start. He got a little bit of stick, maybe because there was one or two incidents where I think you think about the Palace game where he's gone to push when he should have waited right at the end of the match, and the manager actually talks about him post-game, or certainly alludes to the fact that it might have been Frimpong who was looking to push up the pitch that day. There's been one or two moments maybe like that when he's had to maybe learn on the job a little bit. But I think in terms of someone who gets the crowd on the feet and out of the kind of seat at the match, he's absolutely that. He's lightning quick. He's willing to go out as fullback, whether he's starting kind of right-hand side high or whether he's playing a fullback position. He's just someone who offers a massive, massive threat. And as well as that, there's just bags of pace. It's all backed up with pace. And there's one thing Liverpool have been crying out for this season, it is pace.
That's exactly it. What I was going to say was it's interesting when you bring him on because he's the complete opposite of what we're seeing on both sides of the pitch whenever he's not on the pitch. And, you know, I do like him, and I think at different times this season, you know, Liverpool would have more points from the games if we had someone like him either to bring on or to start because of his ability to take on the fullback. I remember when he came back from injury, would have been a couple of months ago, and the first time he plays, takes on a man like 2 or 3 times, and you look at that and you're like, I've forgotten that this happens. I've forgotten that this was a thing that can happen in football. So I think he'll be really important, and I think that, you know, having him back helps with the Vert situation as well, because he is either another option or he's someone that can start. There'll be a lot of games for him to get him up to speed, and then, you know, I think he can have an important part in the rest of the season. I think as well you see Rio come on at the weekend, and obviously there's this, you know, people want to see more of him, and I think we would have seen him maybe earlier if West Ham don't get their first goal. But you know, I think that, you know, you see the two of them both come on at different times in the game and take on a man, and I think that's going to be really important, particularly in games towards the end of the season where it is tight and where Liverpool just need to find a way to win. I think that'll be massive.
I'd argue as well, that kind of threat, it helps Mohamed Salah to have that kind of pace around him as well. You know, Salah can pick a pass out. But also, just in terms of Liverpool's general play, you sort of often, I think, with Guardiola's team when it contained Kyle Walker, just the ability to have someone who's that quick, who can be attacking 1 minute and then get back in the next. Yeah. It doesn't half give you an out when teams are looking to counter and stuff. And the manager talked a little bit about counter-attacks today in his press conference, but having a player who's got that amount of pace, it's such a weapon. To have him back is a massive thing, but the manager did caveat it by saying they'll have to manage his minutes, they'll have to be careful with him. They've got 2 games in quick succession against the same opponents. Be interesting to see whether he does start either of those games, because again, back to Neil's point, you want to have this footballer available in April, May, because he can make a difference.
Yeah, and at the same time, if he doesn't start, then the only other starters either putting the midfielder there or playing Gomez again, and starting Gomez 3 times in 6 days seems like a bit of a stretch because he's also got a couple of centre-back. So the whole thing's a mad balancing act at the moment. But I love Frimpong for exactly the same reason both you love him. From the day that we signed him, his attitude towards being at Liverpool has been fantastic. He appears the most positive player, one of the most positive players I've ever seen in my life. He just seemed like a genuinely fantastic human being. He's got a great positivity to him. But his goal came from the fact that he's willing to take his man on. And I know obviously the goal wasn't given to him in the end, but the fact is we looked at it in the match and went, well, that's what happens if you run at your man. And we don't see enough of that at the moment. We haven't got any pace in the team, basically, other than him, really. Ekitike is quite quick, but in a different way. Rio's quite quick, but not as quick as Frimpong. Frimpong is an out-and-out threat. And there can be moments, obviously, if it's not working for Salah. And, you know, Salah was decent at the weekend. I thought he had a decent game. Didn't do a great deal that was effective, but didn't do anything wrong. So wasn't as careless as he's been in the last few games. There can be times when you can take Salah off and push Frimpong up and have Gomez behind him, and that could be a way into the end of the season for us as well. But we've got to protect him, because up until this season he was a lad with a really good fitness record, and then suddenly he comes to us and we lose him. We lost him off first game.
Goes off in the first game. Yeah.
So but when he came back, we saw him very early on in his career with us, getting up and getting back immediately as well, and defending as a proper right back in the area after he'd been attacking. So he's got the whole thing. He's the perfect right back for us.
What did you make of
No disrespect to Conor Bradley.
What did you make of Cody Gakpo the weekend, Neil? Because again, he's someone who's had a lot of attention, not much of it positive, if we're all honest. I think he has been a reoccurring problem for Liverpool. By no means the only one, but I think from a confidence point of view, and the manager shot this down a little bit when he talked about confidence, but he did say that there's been times this season when he's watched Cody and thought, maybe you're making slightly different decisions there than I would previously have thought. What did you make of his performance against West Ham?
I thought he was absolutely fine. And I think absolutely fine is not sort of getting anyone going in a number of ways, but he was absolutely fine. I didn't think he was absolutely fine against Nottingham Forest, and that's true of a lot of Liverpool players, but I didn't think he was absolutely fine against Nottingham Forest. This comes back to I think the question about the football, the league, because I sort of did a bit of this at the weekend when I was killing a bit of time. Who's your Premier League wingers of the year and the team of the year? Who he is literally saying has been absolutely outstanding. Semenyo starts the season really well, dips, and is really impressed now that
he's on fire now.
He's on fire now, playing for City, so fair play to him. But he's actually doing more just through the middle. They're playing in a really funny way where he's really close to Haaland and he's almost playing just off Haaland, not quite as a 10. But genuinely, there's been times this season where Shirky's look good. I suspect Cody's scored more league goals from open play than Saka. They're top. I suspect he scored more league goals from open play than Trossard. You can sort of keep going here. Esteval's grabbed the attention playing for Chelsea, but he's not actually got that much return and output, and we talk about that output with Gakpo.
Neto in the league, probably similar.
Sorry?
Neto in the league, probably similar.
Probably similar. You can just sort of keep going. I think Mbeumo's done some good work, but it's been interesting that United have now ended up with him more playing as a number 9 than in wide areas. But also Mbeumo is, I think he's a really good player, and they just paid 70 million quid for him. You just sort of drop away Mitoma. Not been great this season.
Why do you think this is?
I think that's literally playing progressive football and getting players into wide areas where they can be devastating is exceptionally difficult. I think everyone's doubled up on all the time.
Look at Gordon's record in the Champions League versus Premier League this season.
Yeah, and including taking the pens out. I think that's a key part of this. I think that if anything, there's been patches this season where Gordon and Barnes have looked great, but there's also been long periods where they've not been scoring at all. I think there's just a thing where they're getting doubled up on all the time. You constantly, if you're playing against a side that's in a low block, then they're in a low block full stop. Sides, the line I've been using this season, Klopp, and I think we do it actually at the weekend, Klopp used to say gegenpressing is the best number 10. Now, that might have been true once, but now Florian Wirtz exists, so Jurgen's got to fuck off. But I think this season sides are using gegenpressing as the best number 6. I.e. we win it back quite high, but then what do? We don't go forward, we go backwards. We look after it, we ensure that we don't get losing again, and we recycle and we get set and then we start. And then in the meantime, sides are dropping back. So there's loads of times you look up and so many wide players up and down the league are looking at 2s and 3s around them. And then do sides gamble with a full-back running to create a bit of space? Well, some do and some don't. But genuinely, sort of go right the way through the division, who's playing well? In wide areas, who you're looking at, that's great. And from a Liverpool point of view, I think this has resulted in everyone being frustrated with Gakpo. He's on 6. His expected goals is 6-ish. He's on 6. He's got 3 assists. And you're not bouncing around with loads of players in wide areas being in double figures. It's just not happening. And I'm not saying for a second, but I want Liverpool to be excellent in all areas. And I want us to be devastating, especially in wide areas, because I think it's our way home. And I think it will be the thing. I think we need to not accept the reality. It's interesting Slot calls it the new reality. I want him working night and day to fucking defeat this shit and defeat it playing really good football and dynamic football while still having set pieces in our armoury. That's what I want. I want us to cut a sway through this league next season. But if Cody ends the season with 10, and in most seasons you say a lad who plays in wide areas gets 10 for you, you go, well, that's all right. No one's playing like peak Sadio Mane and Mo Salah. No one's playing like peak Raheem Sterling and Leroy Sané. Saka's nowhere near as impressive as he was 3 seasons ago in terms of output and in terms of being a joy to watch. And I think you can either say you just don't like your own footballers, which I think I worry is where a lot of people have ended up with Gakpo, or you can say he's not necessarily my type of player, but things are hard. So how do we make them a bit easier for these lads in wide areas? What's our plan?
I wonder does that dictate how they approach the summer in terms of who they, because obviously a big part of what Gakpo did last summer was he competed with Diaz, and you had two options, and one you could bring on in the final 30 and one you could keep for the first 60. I wonder whether that dictates who they're going to bring in terms of what's important from, so you look at Rio as an example, comes on and gets us all excited, and it's the last 20 minutes or the last 15 minutes and that's all we've got to use here. But he has a real ability to drive at players and take on two players, not just one, and cut inside. So what I'm getting at is, do you see that as being something that becomes more important in terms of what they're looking for in the summer for that position?
Yeah, I think you want that, but I think you also want, and this is, for me, the most interesting thing he said in any press conference recently is after the Forest game. Before the one before the weekend just gone, where he says it was really good against Forest because we were able to take off all 4 players in wide areas.
Yeah.
And I think that is a big part of this, so that you're able to say to everyone, right, you're doing 60 today, you're doing 30 today, full-backs maybe 70 and 20, and we're going to go like this, and then you have continuity through the rest of it. And you can shake that up, and you can almost ask different questions of defenders. How are we going to break these down? When's it going to come, and go from there? But to do that, you need the numbers. And this is where the frustration has been this season with Liverpool, has been you've just not got the numbers. What Ingamoa does late in the game against Forest, it doesn't have to have only been him. Liverpool could have had another couple of wingers who you're able to bring on late in games, and maybe one does go on the foot with the stronger side. So suddenly Nico Williams, who spent the whole game thinking all these want to do is come this way, now there's a lad going that way, and he's going, well, this is outside of my job specification. What's going on here? And I think that's part of the plan, or should be part of the plan. I think you want every game, if you can change, if you just sort of think like a manager and how managers operate, and you can make 5 subs. Well, no one wants to sub the goalkeeper. No one wants to sub the 2 centre-backs. Our manager doesn't seem interested in subbing his number 6. And then you can make a bit of an argument if you're playing with 2 6s, where you probably want continuity there on the whole. So where do you want to make your 5 subs? It's both full-back positions to an extent. That, not quite sure. Definitely wide areas and number 9. That's where you want constant freshness to be challenging defenders. Well, there's your 5 subs every single game if it was to go that way.
Look at Arsenal yesterday, and I'm not saying Martinelli's by any stretch the kind of football he should be aiming to be, because he's regressed a little bit, but yesterday he comes on and does what he does and gets a man sent off.
Yeah.
But he's got that pace, so I think when you look at Gakpo, you go, well, if he's not scoring goals, and I take your point, he's scoring some, but not as many as we'd like. But then there's not a lot of other kind of redeeming features where you think, well, he can ping it to him, he'll hold it, he'll bully his man. He doesn't do that. He's not pacey either. So I think where people struggle with Gakpo is if the goals aren't there to the extent where they have been in previous seasons, you're not looking at other features and going, well, at least he gives us this or he gives us that. Do you know what I mean?
No, I think that's 100% the issue that Gakpo has. Someone like Minter, who I really like, but I think he's only scored twice this season. I really like him, and I think he gives fullbacks a torrid time. And then if you had the right things around him, better players, better movements, you never know, that could scale up really, really quickly. But also that idea of he's never out of a game. That was the thing about Mane. Mane, when he was incredible, banged, but he just constantly made his opposition numbers day a living nightmare. You name it, I'm going to do your head in. I'm going to foul you, I'm going to elbow you, I'll head the ball and you, watch this. And that's what you're not getting from Gakpo, and I understand why people, but that's why I think it's a little bit of, what he is? He's a pretty good Champions League quality wide man. There's a fair few of them around. They're doing well in the Champions League, to your point about Gordon, but right now in this league, which of them is genuinely outstanding? And that is the key question, because that's the competition. That's what we're up against. I think we should be aiming for better, always. I think we should be aiming for better. I think we should be looking at from that position. I think from the front 3 over the course of the season, and now you've got Fiat as well, but from the front 3 over the course of the season, in terms of when players are on the pitch occupying those roles, we should be looking at 60 goals. That should be the aim. And so far, if Gakpo has predominantly played left side and he's only on 6, well, we all want more. My thing, though, is that right now, as I say, I think it's just, I'd rather judge the player in a Liverpool context, in a league-winning context, but also in a this is what's happening elsewhere in the league context. And when you add that bit of context, I think you can just be a bit kinder and say at the minute, this is just a slog for everyone. There's fewer goals getting scored, full stop. The proportion of goals that are getting scored that are from set pieces has gone up. So therefore, logically, the proportion of goals that are getting scored from open play has gone down. They're the ones that your wingers are part of for goals and assists. Well, it's just happening less across the board. It's happening less for everyone. So you've got to acknowledge that reality while simultaneously saying, is Mo Salah as he is now good enough to help us change that? and be the team we want to be. We think Florian Wirtz definitely is. Is Mo Salah now? Possibly not. Is Cody Gakpo now? Well, he's been part of it. Does it mean that you get what Craig's saying, which is an absolute belter, and then he alternates with that player? Yeah, quite possibly that could still be enough. Or do you think, you know what, we might need to do something different, so we might get a big offer in the summer? But that's the debate that I think that Liverpool are in the midst of, and that's the Gakpo debate.
And the other thing, lastly, sorry, Ian, is that on both sides of Liverpool's wingers, neither of them are showing any pace or ability to take on man. So it's not just that it's just one of them; it's the two of them.
And there's no one challenging them at the moment, because when we're talking about being able to swap the sides, what we started the season with was Bradley or Frimpong as right back, Robbo or Kerkez as left back, and you could interchange that, and then all the injuries hit us. But the idea of having Bradley at right back with Frimpong up top to challenge Salah was obviously an idea they were looking at, because they were talking about him as somebody who could actually go up top. And then obviously Isak and Ekitike to share the central position, but Ekitike possibly to push to the left, which would take Gakpo as the side. Gakpo is a good enough player that Bayern Munich want to spend 70 million quid on him. So, he's got something that the managers trust, and our manager trusts him to do a job. I think it's more sort of, if we're looking at all these wingers who aren't being explosive anymore, everyone's been subsumed into systems, and they're becoming systems players, and I think Gakpo is a systems player for him.
And all of this is most interesting because last year at the end of the season, Arne Slot was talking about wanting more pace in the team, and Liverpool have ended up in a place where
we've got substantially less.
Well, in the key areas that you need the pace, which is wingers.
Yeah, here is the manager talking about Cody Gakpo.
Now, as you correctly say, I don't judge them only on the goals they score. I judge them on different things as well. So attackers are also judged on the fact if we keep a clean sheet. As defenders are judged by the fact if we can score from open play, because they have to create promising situations for our attackers. But for our attackers, I know how they think and what they want, and that is scoring goals. So I was happy because I think it was the 4-1, if I'm correct. Yeah, it was the 4-1. So that gave us even a more comfortable cushion, but even more happy for him to score because I think he needed that goal, as you correctly say.
And the manager, of course, was asked about the challenge of Wolverhampton Wanderers and what that looks like with 2 games in such a short space of time. He seems fine with it, to be honest, but there's no doubt, even though they are bottom of the pile, there are just signs that Wolves are finding themselves a little bit. The manager's getting more of a tune out of certain footballers, and you'd have to say it could be a tricky game on Tuesday and Friday for that matter.
Yeah, no one's battering them. They're getting decent results in. They've had a couple of decent draws. They've had obviously the Villa win. They are scoring goals. They're scoring 1 or 2 goals. They're not a team that is getting like 5-0 every week, which is what we thought they were going to be. We thought they were going to go down as the lowest points total in the history of mankind, but they're not that. And I think when they came to Anfield, I think they looked better than their position said at the time. And I still think, and this is the thing the manager said, there's so much money in the league, everyone's got better players. So the worst of a very strong, rich league, which isn't acting as a strong league, it's acting as a league that's actually nullifying itself. But the worst is going to be better than the worst was 10 years ago. So they are still a threat, and you've got to treat them as a threat. And this weird idea of playing them twice in 3 days as well, it's just very, and only the 7th time it's ever happened in our history, apparently.
Right, okay. Well, listen, it is Molyneux on Tuesday night, so it's Rich Hobbs.
From Wolves Fancast, I am joined by Rich Hobbs to talk about, let's be clear about this, a football team who are under no illusions with the direction of travel for the season, Rich. But simultaneously, I think the last few weeks, you've collectively began to enjoy your football more and more.
Yeah, I was going to say, I appreciate the bar was pretty low. But we've not completely embarrassed ourselves since maybe the start of February, actually going more into the start of the new year, to be honest. But I think as football fans in general, you can cope with your team not necessarily being good, but it's hard to not enjoy them. Say not necessarily giving 100% or just looking poor, and if nothing else, Rob Edwards has pulled the standards up to, make us look somewhat respectable. And obviously, we know we're getting relegated, and I'm kind of very much a believer. I think any good performance is a good performance to, if nothing else, to keep the fans on side.
There's also,
he's building for next season. There's two ways he's building for next season, and the players are building for next season as well. Some of them are playing for what's going to be their Wolverhampton Wanderers future. And let's be clear, some of them are playing for moves. But it feels like Rob Edwards has coalesced everyone.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's very clearly some potential shop window opportunities for players, and I think a lot of them won't have done themselves any good in the first half of the season. Wolves have very much been a conveyor belt side the last couple of years, and I guess some of the players who you'd have thought would be maybe next in line to go in terms of maybe João Gomez or maybe Andre, given the team's overall performance and theirs to a degree as well, actually their stock has dropped off completely, particularly when you know, for both of those two players, there's a World Cup happening in the summer as well. So there's a few motivations for these players. And at the same time, you know, signing Armstrong in the January transfer window, it's one of those where short term and in the moment, it's very clearly a championship signing. But also at the same time, actually, this is Wolves getting ahead of it, getting a proven second tier striker who we know is going to do a job next season and won't necessarily ultimately embarrass us for the second half of the season. And if nothing else, and again, it's fronting up, it's showing, it's showing up. And it sounds like it's a really basic ask for a footballer to not go hiding. But when your team is playing poor, you can see those personality traits come out in certain players. It can be quite difficult. And you're right that, you know, having a couple of those players and bringing through the likes of Mane as well, and, you know, a couple of the others who've kind of stood out the last couple of weeks. Ultimately, there's a couple of bits of optimism for next season at the very least.
As part of that, then, you know, with these two games, which one's more significant for Wolves? Because all I can think is, you know, the league is where the league is, but madder things have happened than a genuine cup run. If you see what I mean.
You know, and I think even the performance against Arsenal's quite indicative of this. And actually, to be honest, both our fixtures against Arsenal, you know, Wolves are bad. We're arguably historically bad at this point. I think the gulf in terms of teams in the Premier League is a lot shorter than it was when Derby got relegated, for example. Yep. And however bad Wolves have been, we are still an established Premier League outfit. And it only takes a team to be a bit off their pace or not quite sharp enough for even a team like Wolves to cause you a bit of trouble. And in a one-off game, it can be quite... I imagine from a Liverpool perspective, you go, actually, you know what? We actually do need to play, because if we aren't quite at the races, Wolves have shown that, you know, frankly, we like to piss on bonfires.
Yeah,
it's the bluntest way of putting it. And actually, you know, it would be pretty impressive for Wolves to, you know, finish with sub 20 points in the Premier League and somehow get to the semi-finals or even the finals of the FA Cup.
It would be impressive. It'd be entertaining as well. And this is where, you know, if I let you play God, Rich, and you can win one of the next two games, are you picking the cup game?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Genuinely, I mean, I think there's probably a groundswell of relief after the Aston Villa game. And you see Rob Edwards afterwards, and you can see how much it almost meant more to him than the players in a way. And I don't know how much it was just for show, how much of, you know, he came through the Villa academy as well, so he's got a bit of history with them, but he was so pumped up for it. And part of me does think actually it's because we've got over the Derby record. I think there is a level of we just didn't want that stigma attached to the club, that it doesn't matter if we can't lose every game in the league this season, at least we won't have that to hang our hat on. So for me, I think anytime you get the opportunity to play a big team and win, it's fantastic. But ultimately, you know, a win against Liverpool while we get relegated wouldn't be remembered. A semi-final appearance after beating Liverpool when we got relegated would mean something.
So with the selection then, obviously Wolves played Friday night, so Liverpool was Saturday, Wolves were Friday night, so he's got an extra day anyway leading into Tuesday on Liverpool. He also, I noticed through that game, was reluctant to use his subs. He doesn't change anything until we get after the other side of the 80th minute, because I think he thinks they're playing well, they're battling well, the shape, the system's working. Are you actually expecting him to change the starting lineup from the one that played against Villa? Do you think he might go with Tolu up top and maybe drop Armstrong down to the bench and maybe select Armstrong on the Friday game? Or do you think he'll just go unchanged?
I'd be tempted to go unchanged, chiefly because I think the further the game goes on, I think Tolu's shown he's a really good centre point for an attack, which I think I'm quite a big believer in a number 9, so to speak, and someone who doesn't leave, the width of the goalpost. But I think against Liverpool and potentially how the game would likely drag out, ultimately, I think having someone like Armstrong who's a little bit more busy and can kind of just ask a few more questions throughout the game and make it almost a bit more of a mentally taxing game, hopefully. And then to bring on a big lump of a striker effectively to kind of shift it up after 75 minutes feels a little bit more effective than kind of the other way around for me. I think the rest of the team almost picks itself at this point, which, I think is probably the first time in about a year we've had a chance to say that. And again, that comes from a club and a manager ultimately who's just found that bit of consistency. And even the likes of, João Gomez and Andre not necessarily starting every game together because their abilities don't necessarily always match up. But actually, there seems to be a little bit more understanding across the whole team now.
Last little thing is he goes really strong for that game in Grimsby in the League Cup. I just want to combine these two games, on this, Rich. Do you feel as though the likelihood is again he'll go pretty strong Tuesday to Friday? I expect to see Mane, who looks very exciting, play both games. He's used Chichawa in this right wing back position where he's really advanced and he took the left one back a little bit. Are you expecting to see him again across the two games? Not go literally the same 11. I suspect he'll change the goalkeeper, but are you expecting him to go pretty similar across the two games as well?
Yeah, pretty much. I think that it's a short turnaround for both teams. Realistically, the Wolves squad isn't strong enough to massively rotate out. There is still kind of those clear drop-offs ultimately, and if it's not a drop-off, the striker situations are a great example of this. They're so contrasting. Yeah. It's same as at right wing back, either you go Jackson or you've got Rodrigo Gomez effectively, who's a very different type of wide player ultimately. I could see maybe Rodrigo Gomez getting more minutes. I don't know if that's in the form of a starter though, or if he actually likes to have someone with that bit of extra pace, bit of guile to come off the bench and kind of open a game up would be my only sort of thinking on it ultimately. But we'll see.
Give me a prediction for Tuesday night.
Ooh. I'll go for a Liverpool win.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll go.
Give me a prediction for Friday night.
I've got to say a Wolves win.
There we go.
It's yeah, why not? We do well on Friday nights, apparently.
Excellent stuff from Rich. Let's get back to Ian.
And Neil, Rich has talked about Wolves and what he expects, but how do you see it going on Tuesday? Talk to us.
Yeah, I think they're unchanged. I think it's one of those interesting three at the backs that isn't entirely three at the back. Buemo plays very much as a traditional left back-ish. Is in a back. It's theoretically a back five, and listen, if they haven't got the ball, Chichuma, I think how you pronounce it, is all the way back here, and he will be. But they attack with him really high. The left back remains the left back. The right sided centre back goes into a right backish area, and everyone just sort of shuffles over. So it looks a bit like this. And then what they did with Armstrong buzzes around. He's a funny player. They've obviously bought him with an eye on who's going to score the goals to get us promoted next season. He's one of those players who is the epitome of not quite good enough for the Premier League, by far the best centre forward in the Championship, and you've seen them historically, players like Darren Huckabee, who can also have great days, by the way, in the Premier League, but who just sort of look like they're in that grey zone. They picked Armstrong against Villa, and I wonder if he was going with the strongest side, and this is the other sort of contradiction, is does he actually rest a couple for Tuesday with an eye on Friday, because that's a bigger game for Wolves. But let's just sort of say he goes with the stronger side. And what he does against Villa, Bellegarde, Armstrong and Mane are all in this sort of area here where you can almost call it 3-4-3-0. Armstrong drops and does people's heads in, pushes the centre-backs, does all of this. But if you imagine him there, where they end up, and I very rarely do full tactics board stuff, so I'm glad the camera's there. You've got the two centre midfielders, who will probably be Gomez and Andre, unless he wants to rest one. If Armstrong comes and does the heads in, and then these two come narrow, which is what they've been doing increasingly, and if we remember Edwards' Luton, there was an element of that. It'd be 3-4-3, but the two wider players in the attacking third would come narrow and drop a little bit deeper. That's Bellegarde and Mane. And all of a sudden there, if you look at my little counters, and obviously the little counters, but that's 5 against 3 in that area. And that's part of what Villa just sort of couldn't cope with. They were able to have numbers and weight of numbers in here. And so even if you push them back, they all drop back together. And then through that then, what are they doing? Well, they're all occupying the fucking central areas, and they can double up in the wide areas because of the wing-backs who've come in all the way through here. So they're just difficult to sort of get through. And then when they want to explode on you, Bellegarde carries it really well. Mane carries it really well. There's hard running from Gomez and Andre that we've seen down the years. Andre tends to be a bit more responsible, but Gomez likes to go and break. So all of a sudden he can come at you the other way with a fair bit of pace and direct running through the middle of the pitch. And that, I think, asks Liverpool a couple of questions about their selection. I, for instance, would not be surprised at all if the right back isn't Frimpong and isn't Gomez and isn't Szoboszlai, but is Curtis Jones. Off the basis that if they're going to play narrow, but we think we're going to dominate possession, going to have Szoboszlai in there, Jones doesn't even get on at the weekend. And I think part of the reason why might be because they want him to do a big stint in this one. And Jones then is able to, as we saw against Forest, him and Szoboszlai just got on the ball and moved the ball around, pushed them back, because that's what we need to do. Because that's what they've been doing, and that's what works for them, is having explosive sort of pace through the middle of the pitch, ball carrying through the middle of the pitch, but also being able to outnumber you and just piss you off, which is what they effectively do to Villa and go, we're going to make this so hard for you today, so horrible, there's no space. And that's how we're going to compress it. So I think they're an interesting outfit. They're obviously, they're going to finish 19th or 20th. I think they're probably the 19th best team in the division. I think Burnley are probably worse than them. And they've got a cop for it over the course of the season. But I think the other thing we've got to worry about on Tuesday and Friday, Ian, is I think they're playing with a fair bit of freedom. And I think that's often the most dangerous thing you can see in a football team. They're either playing to be there next season, they're either playing for pride, or they're playing for a move. And all of those three things, it feels like Edwards has got them common ground, got them all at least believing in whichever one of those things that for them individually, and harnessing them to a bit of a collective. We should beat them. We should beat them twice. But I think it's right to say that it won't be easy. But I also think it's not just not easy because, well, they're going to fight for everything. I think it's not easy because they've actually got a bit of front-footedness, and that's what we're going to have to worry about.
No, I totally agree. I think when you've got a team with really zero pressure on them, they can be a really dangerous beast. And yeah, I think Liverpool could be not necessarily walking into one on Tuesday, Craig, but I do think it'll be a tough game. I think Friday will be similar. But Neil's mentioned a couple of things there. Going into the West Ham game, I thought he might be tempted just to hold Joe Gomez back and then start him at Molyneux. Now he might still do that, but we know Joe going twice in a matter of 2 or 3 days can sometimes be a little bit of a worry and a concern. Neil mentioned Curtis Jones there. I was surprised he didn't come on at all the weekend. Trent Naoni comes on. I think there's almost been this weird thing with Jones where for a few weeks now the manager just seemed really reluctant to use him. Now he has used him in some games, so I'm not suggesting he hasn't wanted to use him at all, because we've seen him play in football matches and start some games as well. But do you think there is anything in that? Because there's obviously this talk about him potentially moving on as well. There was the Inter Milan talk. I don't want to make something out of nothing here, but it does feel like there's maybe a reluctance to play him more now than maybe 3-4 months ago.
Yeah, no, I agree. Obviously, he starts him against Forest, doesn't he? And he does, and he's poor. and he's poor. So the manager might look at that and say, well, that's one of the reasons he was so poor against Forest. But then so many of the players were. I really hope there's nothing in it really, because I think players like Curtis Jones are really important in squads that want to win things, and particularly whenever they are local. I know that's used against them, but I think it's important to have someone like that in the team, someone that really understands the club and all of that. But just as a player, like I really, really like him, and I hope there isn't. Obviously there was a talk around the Inter Milan stuff in January, and that came late in the window and didn't feel as if it was ever going to amount to anything. But then, as you say, around that time is when you start to see a little bit less of him. I thought it was to do with the contract. The contract is the interesting part here, because if the manager is with us still next season, I think Curtis Jones is in his final year, if I'm not mistaken.
He's going.
Yeah, so he'll be going into his final year. I think there's quite a few of the midfielders in that situation, and so you will or are likely to see some movement in that. It'll be interesting to see who he looks at and decides that they should let go, because they can't all sign new contracts and they can't all stay, I don't think. But it'll be interesting to see over the next coming weeks, because it's been during a period where he's maybe not needed to make as many changes because they've had gaps in midweek. They've got games now, and surely you're going to see more of him.
Yeah, and I can accept Neil's point that he might have him in mind for a stint right back against Wolves, for instance. But I think if you are Curtis Jones and you're seeing Trey Leone come on before you in a home game, I think if it was me, I'd have a little bit of an issue with that, to be honest. And that's not me saying Jones should always be ahead of certain other footballers. I think he was so bad against Nottingham Forest. I could understand the manager being frustrated with him, certainly for that first 45, which was just so below what you'd expect. And I understand he comes in not expecting to play, but footballers can get injured in minute one, so you have to be ready to play the football match. You can't have that as an excuse, you know what I mean?
But also, whenever the manager has not been a manager who is always ready to give young players a go, at different times of season, you're looking at a game and going like, why aren't they giving him a go, or why aren't they giving, particularly in the cup games, it hasn't been. So it is a strange one. We'll have to see over the coming weeks what happens with Jones, but you'd imagine he has a part to play. If he doesn't, it really is a statement. Like, that is sending a message either to him or whatever, but surely he has to play.
Other kind of bits and bobs around the team. Like, again, going into West Ham, I thought he'd probably make changes after that game for Wolves. Only a couple, maybe one, maybe two. But now I'm thinking, does he just try and go with the same 11? I mentioned before, would he go with Gomez again? Not so sure. But, does he push Kirkes again? We took him off in certain games. Does he give Andy Robertson maybe a go in this one? We know we can't do much with the centre-halves, but how do you see it shaping up?
I think Robbo makes sense. I think Neil's point about Curtis Jones makes perfect sense, because I was looking at the match going, well, he's either really upset him over something, or he's holding him for the next game. And I was thinking more midfield to take McAllister's place more than Nathan, because McAllister, despite the fact he's put the ball in the net 3 times in the last 2 games, 2 of them actually counting, he still hasn't looked convincing. And I think Curtis would slot in there, gives him a rest, gives him a chance to come back for the next game. But I think right back would make perfect sense, because I think you can't push Gomez again because he's your only cover centre back. You can't push Frimpong. You can bring him on 60, 70 minutes, but you can't push him for a full 90 right away because he's literally just come back. So Curtis at right back makes perfect sense. I think possibly the idea of bringing Leone on at the weekend, if your man management is such that you're having a conversation with Curtis to say, I'm bringing him on now because he's going to start in the FA Cup game, that would make sense, because he came on and he did fine, a couple of good touches. There was a loose ball. Yes, should have scored, yeah. And there's a loose ball that he chased down, but he was in the right place to score. There's a loose ball in midfield that he chased down, got to first and laid off really nicely. So, you can see the touches the lad's got when he's playing with better players. Because up to now, the only time you've really seen him has been in completely changed games, and he doesn't imprint himself on them. With a better team round him, it could be the answer for him. So it could be the intent to give him as much as possible on Friday night, and he could be a starter, which Curtis at right back for this would make sense. Which only leaves you Gravenberg, McAllister, Szoboszlai from the midfield anyway, and then up top is Mweka, TK and Gakpo. That's Tuesday night basically, isn't it? There's not much more you can do.
I think it'd be wild. I agree with you. I think it'd be wild to start Gomez. Like, we've got all of the evidence to tell us it'd be mad. I think he might have one eye on Galatasaray away for Gomez, and I think that's one where he's got all of the experience. You can slot him in one where a draw's fine.
He could also be a centre back in the FA Cup game.
Yeah, potentially, but then, again, I wouldn't start him on the Friday and then start him on the Tuesday, so it's working out what the priorities from the manager and where he might need him. I mean,
you don't have to play 90s. It's important to say that you can do 60, you can do a half, but I do agree.
Even if you see Joe Gomez in any 3 days after.
That's why I thought they'd hold him back for this one. I thought they'd maybe try and muddle through a little bit against West Ham, which is the home game, and then look at the away match and go, well, that's potentially the harder game. So
yeah.
Do you want him in that match? But, I mean, listen, there's a chance maybe he looks at Frimpong and says he could do 60, but again, that would feel like a little bit of a risk given his record.
I think you might just only see a couple of changes in this one and then a few more changes on Friday. I think that'll be the way the manager will look at it. And I think it will be all with Friday in particular, it will all be with the eye on Galatasaray immediately after.
Neil, anything different for you?
No, I just said I think there'll be one change and it'll be Gomez out, Jones in. and listen, I think that you can't just constantly, endlessly cotton wool Gomez. I think, maybe you just say to him, he gets sent, and also Friday to Tuesdays and Saturday to Tuesday, there is an extra day recovery there. So I wonder if you do sort of think, well, we'll use Gomez then on the Friday in the cup game, and it might give one of the two centre-backs a bit of a break. Or somewhere else, or you just go with Frimpong and you have on Friday and you've got the idea of Gomez then to come on and do half an hour, which then sets up Galatasaray from his point of view as well. But I think for this one, one change, Gomez out, and I think it will be Jones in, and I think it will be Jones at right back in the game from the start. And then it wouldn't surprise me certainly if it's going well for Liverpool, if what you actually see is one of the two deeper lying centre midfielders comes off, and Jones then slots in there, so that player comes off for Gomez or for Frimpong and slots in there. I think Salah gets the game, gets the start, and I think he gets the duration as a part of this, unless he's really playing poorly, because I think that the manager likes to rely on Salah's fitness. And the only other thing I've got a minor question mark on, it very much looked to me like for the most of the second half, Cody Gakpo went centre forward and was taking the battering that you get when you play centre forward. Maybe, just maybe, there might be an eye on something around Cody, but I just can't quite see off the back of the goal Gakpo not starting in this one at Molyneux. So I think it's one change. I think it'll be Jones in and it'll be Gomez out.
Yeah, and for all the things I said before about Jones, I mean, he does start him at right back against Brighton as well, which is not that long ago. So Neil, score prediction, what do you think?
I think Liverpool will win. So I'll just go with a classic Molyneux scoreline of Wolves 0, Liverpool 2.
Same, 2-0.
3-1, early goal, another set-piece goal up the Reds.
Oh, absolutely. Take some of that. That has been the pre-match warm-up for Wolverhampton Wanderers. We'll see you again very soon.